Hello folks, this is Black Cross here, and today I wanted to do a different video than I normally do. I've always wanted to do a random top 10 video, but I never knew what video I wanted to start. So after playing Dark Souls, I finally decided on a top 10 that I wanted to go ahead and start working on. That one being is the top 10 Dark Souls bosses. So, with all the bosses that I have fought in my playthrough, being that the normal playthrough and as well as the Abyss quest, I can safely say that I have gathered my perfect top 10 bosses that I love to fight. These are, of course, the actual bosses themselves, whether they be like the following Artorias, or Civ, or Quelaag, you know, those type of bosses. The ones that do not count in this top 10 list of mine are like repeated bosses, and by repeated bosses I mean like, you know, the Asylum Demon, the Trade Demon, as well as the Fire Siege Demon. Also too, the Bell Gargoyle, as well as like the Moonlight Butterfly, they do not count either, since they technically show up in different areas. So in other words, the Tartarus Demon and the Capra Demon don't count either. Also too, some people may say that like the Hellkite Dragon as well as the Hydra are technically mini-bosses. And while that may be the case, I do not count them either. And neither do the mini-bosses that like Wikipedia count as well, such as Haval, the Metal Boar, so on and so forth. So, like I said, the list is strictly based on the actual bosses themselves. So, without further ado, let's go on ahead and get started with the top 10 favorite bosses of Dark Souls. Number 10 is Gravelord Nito. Gravelord Nito is an unusual legend, mostly because, according to the description of his lore, he is basically the first to die. I don't really think that he was the first to die, more like, probably more or less the first to ascend over death, more than likely. That being said, though, the ability that he has, according to the description, is that he has the ability to spread disease and, disease and corruption throughout everything that tries to get in his way. When you first fight him, though, you find out that he has a bunch of skeletons that he is controlling under his control. Immediately, that responds to the fact that he is also a necromancer, which makes sense. So in other words, you have to kill the skeleton first with a divine weapon, so that way they can't be respawned either. By the time you get that part down, the rest of the fight is relatively easy. What with the fact that he basically only has like 3 movesets that I know of right off the back. The first one is if you're from a distance, which is basically his, his sword spike attack. I'm not quite sure, but when he casts it, it immediately inflicts toxic, and if he hits you enough times with that ability, you'll be toxicated throughout the fight, unless you have some of those moths build up, in which case that would help you out. The second moveset is basically a straightforward attack, as well as a grab attack, which when he grabs you, basically his skeleton body basically tries to attack you from within. After that, his main attack is basically whenever he spreads his disease out. When he hunches down and it basically pushes out this gulf of blackness on the ground. Basically, you'll want to stay away from that because it hurts. It really does hurt. But like I said, once you take care of the skeletons, this boss fight isn't really that hard. If I had to rank its difficulty, like I said, Gravelord Nito would be the second hardest boss soul to attain. And the reason for that is mostly because of the fact the journey on the way to get to him is relatively a tricky pathway. What with a bunch of ledges that you could fall off from, as well as skeletons that can easily either be revived or overpower you within a short amount of time. Number 9 is Sanctuary Guardian. When I first encountered this boss, I was not expecting to fight him this soon. I mean, seriously, the second you enter in the Abyss, he's right there, the first boss you fight. Literally, right there. When fighting him, though, he has multiple elements you have to watch out for. The first being that water. In other words, if you're not a good roller or a good dodger, you will need the rusted iron ring in order to help you move around in the water. Secondly, he has thunder element, as well as poison attribute with his tail. You can cut off the tail and use it as an actual weapon once you're able to cut it off, that is. This boss is interesting to me because it's more or less of a chimera, with the fact that it is part lion, part, I guess, eagle, if I want to be more precise. And at first I thought the tail was a snake, but after seeing that it's actually a scorpion tail, that was actually a shock for me. I was not expecting that. Definitely one of the more unique bosses that I fought within this game. Number 8 is Cease the Scaleless. I say this already once before, I will say it again. The boss fight sucks, but it's still a relatively cool boss to encounter. One of them being is the fact that he is one of the last of the dragons that you actually fight in the game, according to the lore itself. Being that Cease the Scaleless killed his own race because of his jealousy of not having the scales for eternal life. That being said, he's more or less of a mutant the more you think about it. Proof of that is within the intro cutscene within Dark Souls. He looks like that, but in a more fleshier form. So really, he's not so much as an interesting creature so much as he's more of a defective dragon, because of the fact that he has no scales, and he's not like any dragon I've seen. What makes this fight so difficult, though, is that he has an ice breath that if it hits you, it causes curse damage. Which means that if it hits you, it will cause your HP to go to half, and curse is basically an automatic death the second it hits you. Another interesting thing is that if you're able to cut the back tail of Cease the Scaleless, is that you'll obtain the Moonlight Blade, which is interesting because I found out that that's actually more or less of a cameo reference to one of From Software's older games. Number 7 goes to the Iron Golem. Admittedly, this isn't all that hard of a boss fight, not so much of an interesting boss fight, but the size and scale of the giant itself. The situation in this boss fight is that there are multiple things you gotta watch out for. One of them is that the giant that throws the bomb boulders above your head, which I completely forgot in my playthrough. I completely forgot about him, but you have to kill him or otherwise that thing will just keep throwing them at you during the boss fight itself. The second thing you can be sure of is that if you're needing an extra help, Iron Turkus is available to where you can summon him when you're in human form. A few things to note, too. This boss, his boss soul, will allow you to get the Iron Golem Axe, which is a very powerful heavy weapon, and it has the ability to launch a shockwave just like this boss is able to as well. As I played through New Game Plus, though, I found out something interesting that I never tried before, which is that you could actually push off the Iron Golem. Well, I don't know about pushing off, but you can get him to fall off the ledge, if you're able to, and if you're in the right position. It's actually pretty funny. The second thing to note, though, is the fact that if he's stunned, and if you do enough damage to him, he'll actually fall on his back altogether. Number 6 is Manus, Father of the Abyss. I will admit, when I first got ready to fight this boss, I was a little bit afraid, knowing that the 2 party members that I have attained had already been disappeared and I had to fight this guy alone. But thankfully I didn't. But even if that was the case, I realized something interesting about this boss. He has a fucking huge HP bar! I mean, seriously, I was buffed up and I barely did 1/10 of his HP. I was like, oh, I think I am screwed. Thankfully, though, the 2 party members were there. Thank you so much for helping me out with that fight. Because knowing my luck, I probably would have died within the first try. Then again, he's not really that hard of a fight, not that hard of a battle. It's just, he is overwhelmingly huge, and that one dark attack, I will admit, did kind of startle me. But this boss fight was actually more interesting, and it was one of the more tougher fights within the Abyss Quest downloadable content itself. If you so happen to beat this boss and attain his boss soul, you'll be able to forge a weapon, Manus' staff. As of right now, I don't know how powerful it is compared to the other staffs, but I'm pretty sure it can't be as big of a difference as the standard sorcerer's catalyst is.
One of us thou art not. If thou hast misstepped into this world, plunge down from the plank and hurry home. If thou seekest I, thine desires shall be requited not.
Okay, we're finally getting to the good ones. Number 5 is Crossbreed Priscilla. Next to the fact that the area is practically my favorite zone to go in and encounter multiple playthroughs, Crossbreed Priscilla is probably one of the more interesting boss fights to encounter, one of which is the lore herself. For starters, she's trapped within the painted world. Why is that? As of right now, I'm not quite sure. In fact, I don't even know who Artorias is. That's probably one thing that has not been explained within the Dark Souls game yet. But Crossbreed Priscilla is basically a combination between a dragon and a deity. Now, what dragon I've seen that has fur, I have not been sure of, but I'm pretty sure the Everlasting Dragon is the only one who has fur. That being said, the boss fight can be and will be tricky, mostly because she has the ability to become invisible. This boss fight alone makes it a challenge, and the fact is that there are 2 ways in which you can handle this boss fight. One of them is doing the El Toro move that I did, which is basically to run at her, stop by her feet, do an attack, and then run away so that way she doesn't attack you, because if she does bleed damage. And if that builds up, that hurts. It really does hurt. The second way to do it, though, is if you wielded pyromancies, which I'm sure a lot of people already knew this if they've already played this part. But as far as I've known and as far as I've heard, people who have played through Dark Souls usually misses the painted world altogether, so they never get a chance to fight her either. Another thing too to remember is that you don't have to fight her. You can just walk past her and just jump off the ledge. But yeah, pyromancies is a bigger and a very heavier effect against her. Mostly because once you hit her with pyromancy, she becomes visible again for a brief moment of time, allowing you to actually see her and do some damage to her. Number 5 is indeed Crossbreed Priscilla. Number 4 is Dragonslayer Ornstein and Executioner Smoke. This boss fight alone is enough of a reason to have anybody play through Dark Souls. Erolando has a lot of quests that you can encounter, a lot of bosses too. What was the fat of Gwendolyn, or Dark Sun Gwendolyn? You also have Crossbreed Priscilla, Seats of Scalus. But a lot of people will remember this area because of Ornstein and Smoke. It's the only boss fight next to the Bell Gargoyle, but remember, that doesn't count, of the only boss fight where you fight 2 bosses in one area. And what's even more interesting is how they both coincide with each other. If you haven't checked out Silvermon's lore talk of the Dark Souls series, you should check him out, as he does a description as to how Ornstein and Smoke are both related to each other. An interesting fact to remember about both Ornstein and Smoke is the fact that both of them will become super powerful, go into a mega form, if you kill one or the other. For example, if you were to kill Smoke first like I did, Ornstein will grow into a larger form of himself, making him a deadly adversary, mostly because of the fact of his lunging attack. Whereas if you defeated Ornstein first, Smoke will smash his hammer on him and he will attain lightning ability. A lot of players have contemplated whether which one is the hardest mega form to fight. Personally, I found Ornstein to be more of a harder challenge to fight than Smoke would be. Smoke is actually a slower form of what Ornstein would be if he was larger. A lot of people say Smoke is actually the hardest one, but he's not really, especially when you combine 2 particular effects. One of them I found out in my last playthrough, where if you had a heavy great sword and you hit him while he's trying to do an attack, he'll be stunned for a brief moment of time, allowing you to lunge in for a second attack. The second thing to counter for, he has the element of thunder, actually, which means the fire element acts as a double counterweight to help you in this boss fight. Whereas Ornstein, fire is the only thing that will help you out. He's still a fast mother effer. That being said, depending on which mega form you kill, you'll obtain their boss soul, as well as gain access to where you're able to purchase one of the armor sets from... I completely forgot that guy's name. The merchant in which has the crystal weapons. You can also purchase the Iron Golem, but a lot of people will probably purchase either Ornstein or Smoke's armor from this guy, as well as being able to purchase like Asura, King Gwyn, as well as Gwendolyn's armor. Number 3 goes to the Great Grey Wolf Sith. Before I played the DLC, this was originally my favorite boss fight within Dark Souls. For 2 reasons. Number 1, he just looks so freaking amazing. All he is a wolf, and with basically a giant sword. That's it. But he's so freaking cool and amazing. Another thing too to counter, the detail within this boss fight is just so ridiculously, outrageously outstanding that the game lags. Holy shit! Holy shit does the game lag. But this boss fight is so fun, and if you're able to fight him and actually kill him, you'll attain the Covenant of Astora, which is necessary in order to traverse the abyss in order to take on the 4 kings. What's even more interesting about Sith is the fact that he's the only boss in the game in which you have 3 optional ways in order to craft his soul. He is the only one to craft up to 3. The first one is the Great Shield of Artorias, and then he has 2 different versions of the Great Sword of Artorias. There's the original one, and then there's the cursed one. People have debated which one is actually the strongest one. I have to say, I'm not sure because I've never tried either one of them. but the Great Shield of Artorias is a badass shield, allowing you to absorb any form of attack without being pushed, I can't even think of the phrase now. Without being pushed back. But the Great Grey Wolf Sith was my #1 favorite before the DLC. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what's #2 and 1 then? Well, you're about to find out in just a second. #2 goes to Knight Artorias. Knight Artorias, I will admit, he was intense. Every second that I fought him, I felt as though I was fighting practically the biggest badass in the whole entire game. Throughout the entire game, you kept hearing about him, and reference of his legend. First off, Knight Artorias is practically the lead knight in King Gwyn's army. Most people know that there are 4 chosen knights that Gwyn chose personally himself to be his guardian knights. There's Ornstein, Artorias, Goth, and Katerin, I think is pronounced, the small one. But Knight Artorias is the one that everyone remembers. And according to what people say, technically on the cover of Dark Souls, that's him traversing the abyss. Which I guess that would make more sense considering the position. He's technically a left-handed sword wielder, but judging by the game itself, his left-handed was completely ripped off and just hanging out there like a dead limb, and he's using his right arm. If he's able to do that type of power with just his right hand, I'd be afraid to see what his good hand could do. Another thing to remember is that during this boss fight, he can charge up. He powers up every time he goes back and charges up a black aura around him. If he does this continuously, he will get stronger and stronger throughout the entire fight. Every bit of this fight was so intense and so awesome, I can definitely see why people love encountering this one. As well as to why people keep saying that the 2 boss fights they hate to kill the most, which is Knight Artorias and the Great Grey Wolf Sith. To give you a brief discovery as to these 2, I recommend checking out Silver Monster's video on these 2. There is quite a legend behind it, being the fact that Artorias tried to protect Great Wolf Sith. You can encounter Great Wolf Sith in the downloadable abyss, but you have to traverse even deeper within the cave, in which case I'm not willing to traverse in. But you do attain a shield known as the Cleansing Great Shield of Artorias. It's an interesting story and lore, but also a sad one to look into. Still though, it is an amazing boss fight. Knight Artorias, I salute thee for #2. Before we go to the #1, let's talk about the honorable mention. And there's one boss fight that I do want to honorably mention. That boss fight being Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. There's a reason why he needs to be honorably mentioned. He's a final boss, meaning that he's basically the main goal within the game that you try to achieve over. Second, if you did like I did and completed every quest, fought every mini-boss, actual boss, killed everything, became the powerfulest badass you can possibly be, to a point that even Astora would honor you, Gwyn isn't that tough. I mean, you saw it in my playthrough. Gwyn went down like a frickin' wuss. Now, it could be because of the fact that I did have nice Solaire with me, but the fact that I was able to do what I did against him, it's no wonder people claim that he's just a sad boss to fight. Because at that point, you're so overpowered, you forget. Once you beat him, that's it of the game. It ends. You can choose to either relight the flame, which sacrifices yourself in order to prolong the Age of Fire, or you can choose to walk away and summon up the Age of Darkness. Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, is indeed a boss that is worthy of an honorable mention. Alright, before we get to the number 1, let's review all of the previous bosses that I've talked about. Number 10, Gravelord Nito. Number 9, Sanctuary Guardian. Number 8, Cease the Scaleless. Number 7, Iron Guardian. Number 6, Manus, Father of the Abyss. Number 5, Crossbreed Priscilla. Number 4, Dragonslayer Ornstein and Executioner Smoke. Number 3, the Great Grey Wolf Sith. Number 2, Knight of Artorias. So, question is, what is the number 1 pick for my top 10 boss fights in Dark Souls? Let me ask you a question. When you made a character in Dark Souls, did you just see yourself as a player? Or do you see yourself like I did, as a knight?
Dragons shall never be forgotten. We knights fought valiantly, but for every one of them, we lost 70 of our own. Exhilaration, pride, hatred, rage. The dragons teased out our dearest emotions. Thou will understand one day. With our twilight, old thoughts return in great waves of nostalgia.
That's right. Black Dragon Comment is indeed the number 1 boss fight. I love this boss. It could be because of the fact from my love for dragons, but that being said, it doesn't matter. This boss fight is just so freaking awesome. The moment you first encounter him when you play through the DLC, immediately you think to yourself, "Oh boy, we got another troll enemy to take care of." But no, he's actually an intense boss to encounter. You could fight him normally, but then it would be nearly impossible to fight. It's best to have Knight Goss to take him out, even though he is blind as a bat, which makes it a more interesting NPC to encounter. When fighting this one, I'm gonna be honest with you, I was a little bit worried because I never knew how he was gonna fight. He fights with practically a striking attack and a hover attack with his black fire. He also uses his black fire from a distance after lunging towards you. But the biggest one that scared me the most was actually the move where his middle eye glows and he picks you up and basically, I guess I want to say, strangles the life out of you with that eye. This boss fight was so intense that immediately I saw myself as an actual knight. No kidding. I mean, seriously. The entire fight was just so epic, and I love it. They certainly knew how to simulate the effect of a knight versus a dragon. There is one downside to this, and that is the item that you attain after you beat him. And that is the Calamity Ring. The Calamity Ring allows the wearer to receive double damage, meaning you go down quickly. Very quick, in fact. Why you would wear this item? For one reason. Because there's a glowing eye hovering above your head. Now, here's an interesting thought. Say you were PvPing somebody, and the other person was to see that. Either I would be overly confident knowing that I could kill you quickly, or 2, I would be extremely worried knowing that your skills are so well intact that you're willing to have that symbol hover above your head. Basically, you better be showing off some skills if you have this ring equipped. Other than that though, you can cut off his tail and attain the Obsidian Greatsword, which I haven't used yet, but on my second playthrough I'm attempting to try to get that, because it looks interesting. That, and there are a number of players who have picked this as part of their top 10 favorite weapons. That and top 10 great powerful weapons. Black Dragon Commit. Thank you for making my Dark Souls playthrough more memorable. Well guys, that was it for the top 10 favorite boss fights in Dark Souls. You're probably asking yourself, why didn't I do a top 10 for Bloodborne? There are two reasons why. One of them, I'm gonna have to replay through it because I've completely lost all of my original footage. I still got the edit footage from Bloodborne, but I don't have the original video itself. So I figured I'd go ahead and re-record it and actually have the boss fights all together. The only thing though, I'm not going to include the boss fights from the Labyrinth. Reason being is because the majority of the bosses that you do fight are more or less repeats, technically. And if I did, it would probably be 1 or 2 boss fights that I would put in that list. That, and I'm gonna wait until the DLC comes out. I mean, seriously, think about it. If the Abyss quest had 4 bosses, I'm wondering as to how many Bloodborne DLC it's gonna have. I'm that excited for it. But from the way it sounds like it won't be released until Dark Souls 3 gets released. Which, that's a long ass wait. But that's okay, because I've still got some other games I need to play through before then. There's Dark Souls 2, Demon Souls, and then hell, let's not forget Dark Souls 3 will be coming out shortly in 2016. I hope you enjoyed this top 10 list, and let me know what your top 10 boss fights in Dark Souls is. Try not to spoil anything within Dark Souls 2, because I really want to be surprised throughout the playthrough. I cannot wait to pick that up and start playing. But until then, I hope you enjoy my top 10. Let me know in the description if you want more. Hope you have a wonderful day, and may God bless you. This is Black Cross, signing off. Take care, guys.